All right, we can get started. So, hello everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. I think this is our fifth version of this, and yeah, excited to see you all. As mentioned or as highlighted on the slide, right? These are public community office hours, so only share, only disclose things that you're comfortable saying publicly. Obviously, don't share any private company things. Um, but yeah, excited to have you all. We have several questions already slated to be answered, hopefully. But if you have anything that you'd like us to cover that's not represented here, feel free to comment on the chat. Also, feel free to raise your hand if you want to just like jump into the conversation. It's very much free form. Um, we invite you all to dialogue with us and to share with the rest of the community, you know, what you have. So, so yeah. So with that, I can go ahead and get started. Uh, so first off, is we have actually several pieces of content that have launched in the past week or so. Uh, we've heard from the community that you want more of these type of things. So uh, hence, right, we responded. We are trying to launch more things like blogs. These are YouTube videos that I'm showing up here, so you could just search these yourselves to watch later. But we want to have this space be something that we can highlight. Cool work that's being done from the community. So this like Wordle agent that was built um, by a colleague from Microsoft. Uh, that it's a cool kind of demo of using Semantic Kernel. We recently also landed the stepwise planner also. So Lee, our resident architect for that, he and I we talked through like what that is, what new functionality does it provide. So certainly check that out. And we also have some more content from Sam Scalacci and John Maeda. These are both the VPs at Microsoft who are effectively like leading this effort internally, and they are, I believe, are launching a series actually. So will be a first of several on the Microsoft Developer YouTube channel that you should definitely check out. Okay, so with that, I can jump into the first question. All right, so we got one from several Code Day Lab interns, which is simple, how to get started with contributing to the semantic kernel itself. So very great question. We very much welcome contributors to the repo. Uh, from my side, I believe we have this, contributing MD markdown that you can refer to. But the TLDR version of this is, right, we invite issues to be submitted, pull requests. Obviously, if you're on Discord, to ask your questions there. We have a pretty, active, vibrant community of people going back and forth, answering each other's questions, which we love to see, right? So that's how I would say you want to contribute. One thing to call out that we recently uh, launched is this board, the public, what do you want to call it? Our backlog, effectively, as well as what is going on in our current sprint. So this is public, right? You can see what our near-term roadmap is for what the team is working on, as well as what items. If you're in Python, if you're in .NET, I think I forget if Java is here too, but soon to be Java, if not already. You can all see what's available to either claim, right? If you want to contribute and say like, I want to own this thing, I want to bring this to the repo. Yeah, for sure, definitely do that. So it's open, available for you all to see. All right. So next question. And again, feel free to uh, add into the chat or raise your hand if you want to add some commentary. But Josh Friedman, he asked, So I'm working with some large PDFs, let's say document 100 to 125 pages. The goal here is to compare these documents with a guideline document that has already been ingested. The output would be something like document 1 is missing 1, 2, 3. Since the size is so large of document 1, I'm having a bit of trouble thinking about how to loop through ingested chunks and compare with the previously ingested chunks of document 2, while also outputting a full contextual review of document 1. Ideally, I would imagine that as each chunk is analyzed, we are saving information somewhere and then passing this information at a later part of the LLM chain. But what was curious, the team's thought, as in the past, you guys have talked about processing large documents, books, etc. Great question. Craig or someone from the Semantic Kernel team, you want to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically, when you have a large document, and the reason this is important, most people on the call may have run into this, but you have a context window, and that's the maximum number of tokens that you can send to the model. And that might be the completion model, it might be the embedding model. There's always some limit. And the limit might be as small as 2,000 tokens, might be as large as 32,000 tokens. And you need to make sure that you don't send more than that, because if you send more than that, you just get a bad request back. It says, no, there was too much information, not going to look at it. So you often have to chunk it, and there's a bunch of different chunking strategies. And so if we're trying to compare documents, so one document is like a reference. I think the scenario here is like, here's a reference document, and then I want to create another document that's like the reference document. That's what I'm going to assume. So I would think that you will have to I would find the sections of a document, and I would make sure that I chunk that section in its entirety. And if I cannot take the entirety of that section, I would chunk it, and I would summarize each chunk, and then do that until it fits within the context window of the model I'm trying to send it to. So let's say the section was 6,000 tokens, and you only have 4,000 to play with. I would chunk it into maybe sections of 3,000 tokens or something like that. I would summarize each of those 3,000 tokens. Hopefully we can get it down to our 4,000 token window, and then I would persist that somewhere. We have a concept of memory, and so you could use the memory infrastructure that's part of Semantic Kernel. It's typically used for embeddings. Doesn't have to be used for embeddings. You could use that, and the reason it's used for embeddings is when you have a corpus of knowledge that you want to then reason over, and that reasoning might be someone typing question, asking a question with voice. You want to do very fast matching of relevance, and so you can use cosine similarity with the vector database, which embeddings are stored in, to do that. So my suggestion here would be to chunk it into small enough chunks for your model that you're working with. You may have to summarize some of it. I don't think we have a bunch of good examples on this. We have some stuff in Copilot Chat that does a little bit of the chunking. And we also have in the GitHub Q&A sample, it's an earlier sample, it's a smaller one than Copilot Chat, some examples of this. It's all in .NET. I don't know, Python, Alex, do we have anything similar for chunking?
I think we have a basic, chunking library in Python.
Yeah, this is a good question, though. This is a problem that a lot of people will run into very quickly.
But maybe just cut it into paragraphs, right? Paragraph will always fit there, and always include in your original document, just your template document, just take one, and when you are cutting it, take three, right? And then find one before, like a window, one before, one after, and then put it in a store, and then go to database and basically pick the most similar vector, right? Pull it out, and then go to ChatGPT and ask, is the information from my template completely contained in the information there? And if not, what is the delta? This way, basically, you can iterate for it, and you will get the responses from ChatGPT. I didn't found this part, I found that part. So, and basically, if you just go to a paragraph, right, maybe you would be able to do it there, right? Just finding similar one and sending it. If the section is complicated, right? But if the section is simple, as you said, then just, okay, if your section is always one page, that would be the simplest and the stupidest one, right? Or if you can cut it, that would be awesome, right? You just put sections, ask, give me the most similar one through a vector search from there, and then ask ChatGPT, is it contained inside, right? And all information, and that would work like a charm, probably.
Yeah, paragraphs is a good suggestion, and especially the like a little bit before and a little bit after, so the model has a bit of extra context. And overlapping as well. Like if you are chunking, thinking about overlapping the chunks as well, so that you don't lose some context. It's good. I think you will have, as you look at some of these larger documents like contracts, or I was looking at the nuclear regulation application at one point. Like that's a big kind of messy document. There's also images and tables that come in, so it's not always just text that we have to deal with as well. There's some other things we may have to deal with that are images, but I like that suggestion.
Yeah, I will just add here that a lot of the things that we're describing are for sure like engineering solutions to this, but what will happen is, and we've already started to see this, is that these models will get better, the context windows will increase, and if anything, right, there may be a future where if it's 125 pages, no problem, just send it completely to, GPT X and it will work. So, but yes, everything that was said so far, all good strategies to come up with, and if anything, these are good sample ideas for us to iterate on and share out. Cool. All right, so we have a question from YouTube actually. So Snarky Boojum, he or she, I don't know, but the person asks, is there a way for an SK app to incorporate human feedback to do some kind of reinforcement learning to improve how the planner operates over time for common use cases in the application? Also, how do you see prompt flow integrating with skilled plugin creation in SK in the future? The automatic variant testing and performance across those prompt variations and downstream analytics would be cool. I agree, that would be very cool. So okay, I'll do the second half of the question first. So prompt flow was announced at Build. They featured Semantic Kernel and LangChain actually kind of side by side as like an orchestrator. You could choose to create your flows. I guess that's what they're calling it. And the idea is that, at least from what I saw in the demo, that yeah, if you have a more complicated chain of functions or skills or plugins that you want to execute, then prompt flow can help like do that, especially in like a visual way, kind of in a like low code, no code style fashion. And the benefits of that is that they also highlighted is that's really good for like experiments, right? If you have wanting to, see how one chain compares to another chain or one flow compares to another flow, you can do that, run your experiments just as how you would, normal data science style like tasks. So we are actively talking with the prompt flow team, and we will hopefully soon, right, be able to show off a seamless prompt flow integration. So for that area, I'd say stay tuned. In terms of the first question, does anyone from the Semantic Kernel team want to take that?
We should also clarify that there's not one planner. There are now 3 or 4 planners. We have different implementations of planner. You can also come along and build your own planner. So if you wanted to include reinforcement learning, we could think of that as like as simple as a thumbs up, thumbs down from the user based on the response that went back. And this is assuming that it's the entire plan that's been executed. So like I ask something, it goes to Semantic Kernel, which then invokes sequential planner. Sequential planner does something, gives back a plan, and then the user says, yes, run the plan. And then based on the output of that plan, they give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So you could do that. It's not really SK's business to do that. Like you would be doing that as part of your application layer. I think we probably give you enough low-level stuff that you can find like an output to a thumbs up or a thumbs down, for example. So you could do a little bit of that. Improving the planner, though, would probably need you to do a custom planner. You might need to then take the thumbs up, thumbs down and pipe that in. So, but it's a good question. Jump in, Alvin.
But it is not a reinforcement learning, right? You are providing, and you can use stepwise planner, right? And create basically action code user feedback, right? Where you can explain to the model, hey, if you're missing data, you can ask the user, right? Which would loop back and pull the data back from it, but it's definitely not reinforcement learning, right? It is interaction with the user, but nothing is being learned in the background.
It's the human feedback of RLHF, right? It's
yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. If you want to get like into real reinforcement learning, then yeah, it's a bit different. You got to have a goal, and it's a more involved thing. So we haven't done any of that. I don't know if anyone in the community has tried this. It's an interesting thought, and there's some good libraries that do this, like Ray's RLlib. It's very popular. I think it's Python library, but there's a bunch of places it could be tried. We have not tried it, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I guess I would throw out there that yes, the stepwise planner actually is able to correct itself. That's one of the neat things about it. But it doesn't do so with human feedback. It does so based off observations and thoughts that it's forming or that it is seeing. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I provide the initial implementation of the stepwise planner, by the way. So, and you can create basically a skill inside, right, which will tell you can pull the additional data from the user, right? Yep. And instead of going to Google or whatever is the browser or calculator, it could, the planner could use and say, I miss information from the user. Let me ask the user, right? So it would be just a new kind of skill, which you would have to implement. It is not there at the moment, but we definitely could do it. So.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's right. And thank you. Haza is his GitHub username. So thank you so much for the initial implementation for Stepwise. All right. Again, if you want to jump in, feel free to raise your hand or just hop off mute. Otherwise, we'll keep on going. Okay, so Tom asks, are there good examples for limiting and grounding answers to your own data? Something similar to how it works with Azure AI Studio Chat Playground or Azure ML Studio Prompt Flows. The use case is an internal ChatGPT for company knowledge base like product data.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this earlier, right, Alex, with the embeddings and vector databases and Copilot Chat. I would say go and have a look at that, because Copilot Chat is a reference implementation of your own internal ChatGPT. Now, you could literally take the code, the front end, the back end, deploy it, ingest some of your documents, and it will do what you're asking here.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely check out what we have in Copilot Chat. I think this is this follows the RAG pattern for building these type of applications. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And it's all about, how do we sort of do something where we have data that we've stored, usually, let's say, in some vector database, and then how do we retrieve what is relevant, right? Some similarity search, and then in our prompt that we're sending to the model, how do we only say like focus or base your answer off of this chunk of retrieved data, and then that way you can ground it. So I look at our samples. It is a very common pattern that a lot of individuals and enterprises want. So if it's not clear, Tom, just let us know.
I have a sub question here, right? And when you are embedding this data in a chat model, right? Where do you place it? Do you always place it only into the system, right? This, hidden, this whispering, or you cannot, if I put it as a user, ChatGPT will think it's coming from me. If I put it in ChatGPT, he will think that it was already sent to the user, right? So actually, I'm always putting it into system data, but I got the impression that sometimes he's forgetting it. He's not really very careful about this part. So what are the best practices in this area? Do you have any suggestion for this?
So one question that came up last week that I remember was like, how do you include or make use of multiple memory stores in an application? And one of that could be like we have the default like sys.
No, this is not that. This is basically when I'm creating a prompt to ChatGPT to answer the question, right? When I'm giving him a context data, I'm providing, right? I'm providing ChatGPT my grounding information, where to put it. This is what is the best way to put it, right?
Yeah, the system message is typically designed to like frame it, right? And then the user messages we're using chat in a strange way, right? Like originally it was text completion, okay? Text DaVinci 003, text completion. You just give it a prompt, it does it. And then they switched with 3.5 Turbo and 4 to now be chat completion, and it's confused everybody. I don't know for sure that behind the scenes the model is doing anything other than just flattening out that text and passing it on. Maybe it is. Maybe there's some magic that happens with the system prompt that's a little bit different to the user prompt. I have not seen a significant difference between the two of them. I haven't been putting anything really in the system prompt. I think by default, SK
what
just says, just in user prompt. All I do is I just do pass through. I don't even look at any of that stuff. I just say, hey, Semantic Kernel, here's my prompt, and go and execute it as though you are a text completion thing using a chat completion backend, because you have that overload for chat completion.
Yeah.
By default, it's true. It supports the text completion stuff. That's all I do. I never touch any of the low-level stuff. I have heard from teams, though, that they have seen some variety when they do different things with the system prompt and the user prompt. And maybe that's what you're also getting at here. I don't think we have enough clarity on this, and I need to go and talk with the team that's actually owns the endpoint to understand what's going on behind the curtains, because it's unclear. Like
or just let us say this is, or just let us this is the best practice. If you we just need an optimal pattern for this, grounding data. Tell us what is the best way to provide a grounding data, because what I was doing, I believe once I usually now I put it in this into the system info, right, which he forgets a bit, but sometimes I put it, I believe, into user, and I write user hasn't seen this data, right? I don't know this data. Here is the info, but I don't know it, right? So that he can send me this data back, right? Because otherwise he would be thinking that he's repeating himself or whatever, right? But okay.
Yeah, you're thinking of it as a conversation, which is what the chat construct
this is for what it's trained. But
it's what it's set up to do. Yeah, I have never thought of it that way, so I have not run into the same problem. And maybe it's just a difference of perspective on that. But also maybe it's something that I'm missing that I need to, also learn about. So let us do a bit of groundwork, and we'll get back to everybody on that. If we can find, this is the best way to do it.
And let me tell you where it broke for me, right? And as long as you put a big thing in the problem happens when the system info is large and the conversation is large. Then the distance between the start and the end is big. And then when you have URLs which have some very precise parameter inside, it will round them up, right? It will cut things out and replace them there and things like that. And that's where I said, okay, then I moved it lower and said, I haven't seen this data, right? And then he is more observant or more careful not to mix up parameters in my URL, and then it would work. So that was my pain with it.
Very interesting. Okay, we'll find out something and we'll get back to you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, and if anyone in the community has insights or things like that, their experiences, please let us know or share them out.
So there was a demo released, I think, about a week ago. It's using Azure role-based authentication hierarchy. I will share on Discord the link, because I'm on the mobile now. Don't have the link with me, but basically there's an end-to-end demo where you have those roles, and you can manage roles and manage access to data by role.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely share that out. Share the link out. We would love to check it out. All right. Next question. So Alessandro actually has a three-parter. Oh, awesome, and he's here. So great. But I'll read through it, and Alessandro can provide more color or commentary. So he says, I am building an application that will be able to grab or create transcriptions of YouTube, video, etc. videos, and create artifacts, text documents of some which will be generated by AI. For example, you'll get a short description of the video, a TLDR, a long description, list of topics discussed, and more. And he shared out this kind of input example, kind of JSON, as location, title, description, transcript. So this type of format. All right, so first question is, so not all videos are podcasts. Are there any gotchas or recommendations you could give on how to treat different types of transcripts from a prompt perspective? For instance, transcripts of podcasts are worded and structured differently than the transcript of somebody reading a book or a documentary. What's the best way to handle these differences? / does it matter? So we'll start with that one.
Are you using Whisper? How are you getting or is it a transcript that's already alongside the video?
There's both. YouTube gives you the transcript. There's an API, and then I use Whisper for those that I don't have the right things for.
Okay, so you will default to YouTube because you don't have to do anything, right? You take the transcript, and when there's nothing, you do Whisper. Okay, so you've got a transcription.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and you've noticed
the text and the transcriptions of when two people talk or when we use an office hours, they're very different from, say, a documentary or somebody that reads a prose. So is there anything in the prompt that should consider this?
But you could ask it to classify, right? Like you could ask it, and is there more than one person speaking? Like that could be one way to.
But prompt cannot tell you. How can you, I mean, in the prompt, you don't know that. If you don't get it from Whisper or from the transcriber, you don't know that inside, right? I mean, in text, you already, this information is gone, right?
I'm wondering if the model can infer it. So if there's a conversation, right, and the model sees two different things going back and forth, it's pretty clever. It might be able to infer it. Like, what is the probability that there's more than one person speaking? Maybe it knows. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. That came to mind. Yeah. Go for Shannon. Go for Shannon.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I've run into this in a couple of different projects in the past. And determining speaker is extraordinarily hard for AI to be accurate about. Like it will flop in a conversation and get itself tangled. But what I would be super interested in is using SK now to do some graphical analysis or visual recognition, because there'd be a moment if it's a YouTube video where you could do facial recognition and say, how many faces am I seeing every 2 minutes or something like that, and start to infer some other intelligence. Some of the other teams that I've worked on, we've done that with facial recognition and done intelligence around how many faces we're counting and are we looking at the same face. But I would look at some projects that I have seen publicly. I'll try and find some links for them about taking notes in lectures and meetings. You may find that some other people have some strategies there that work, but you're likely going to need to invoke some interesting strategies to make this work and have enough context that it understands how the conversation is flipping.
Yeah, I would add that there might be some APIs out there, maybe even from Azure Cognitive Services, that do this sort of speaker disambiguation, or like gives you like a speaker ID, and then when he or she when they're talking, and then from there, what you can do is that if you have that structured format, you can then use Semantic Kernel that says, hey, this is what the structured format looks like. Can you output, I don't know what you want to do, like a flattened transcript of everything, or only give me this person A's like dialogue. So yeah, I would, yeah.
I thought that Whisperer is delivering this data. I have never used it, but I believe when I was looking into some transcripts, I believe that Whisperer will provide you who is the speaker, right? Speaker 1, speaker 2, and then you will get their texts from there. But
I saw this, but then if when I get the transcript from YouTube, though, then I need the AI to do that inference, so it's kind of like, in half of the inputs, kind of the problem arises.
Use Whisperer for YouTube. I don't know if this is possible, right, to get the audio stream only and put it in there, but.
Yeah, I try these different things out. Let us know. Let us know how it goes. Okay, so you have a second question. So most transcripts will be bigger than the token limit. Therefore, I assume I will need to use text chunking or recursive summarization, like the example shown at this OpenAI link, in order to output my summary or the list of the discussed topics. Am I going in the right direction, and do you have any tips? So yes, this is similar to our previous conversations around, to bypass token limits, especially if the goal is like summarization, right, where you're trying to condense it, make something big, go into something small. A lot of different strategies, right? The text chunking pieces that we talked about for sure will apply. And then you could, like, if I remember this, here, I'll just click the link so that people can see or who are not familiar with. So I remember this this post. Basically, OpenAI back, this seems like ages ago, but like almost 2 years ago, they showed off like, oh, you could summarize an entire book. And at that time, they were operating with probably smaller context windows with the GPT models than they are now. But I think the principle still holds where in order to summarize this book, let's see if they illustrate it. Original text is divided into sections, and each section is summarized. And then section summaries are summarized again into higher level summaries. And the summarizing process continues until a complete summary is achieved. So this is how you go from an entire book, right, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, to then this complete summary, and they show 136 words. Yeah, back then they were using GPT-3 for this. So yeah, so I think very much you could employ similar sort of strategies. It really depends on the goal, right? Are you trying to create a 136 word summary or whatever of a hour-long video?
It's kind of like Cliff Notes
depends.
sort of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Sure, yeah. Yep. Okay, so Q3, so recursive summarization. Is there an example already written somewhere in C# that shows how to store and use the data generated at each step to produce the final results? TLDR, summary of topics.
I don't think we have a sample in the main repository that does this. We have the paragraph chunkers and those sorts of things in there. It's all .NET that you could leverage to do this, but I don't think we have an example published that would like take a book and summarize it, or any large chunk of text. It's probably something we actually should do. So maybe I see a few PMs from the Semantic Kernel team on the call. Maybe this is something that we do want to do. Like it's a standard use case. A lot of people want to do the same thing.
Alessandro, cover everything, or do you have any follow-ups you want to add to it?
It's great, thank you. But especially this last one, if we can get a demo, that would be awesome, really.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next question from Uday. Can we please get an example of how to orchestrate use of context variables between different skills? For example, if I'm using Planner and I have two skills named Optimize Search Query and Bing Search, how do we orchestrate the variables to be ready for sequential Planner?
Yeah, so you own the application control flow here. So if you're using Planner and have two skills, how do you orchestrate? I think what you're saying is you want them to go from optimized search query into the Bing search within the sequential planner, if I'm not misunderstanding this. What would happen in the stepwise planner, given Almir, you had done an initial version of that? Like, how would this work over in, sorry, stepwise planner?
Yeah.
It would just go
Basically,
through?
yeah, but if you would think, yeah, you could use this, you would define in one skill, where you said you can use this to refine the query, right? Now, what I don't know is when he would, would he do it always before submitting Bing query? That you would have to explain him when to use, this skill, right? What would be the logic behind when to use optimized search query, right? If you would tell him in the description, you should always use optimized search query before invoking Bing search, he would do it. So, right. And then it would iterate over it, and it would have, okay, I have a query, I have this, right? And there, basically there, the query, it's not usually there, right? This is implied for this query, for this use case, it is implied, right? Because if you provide him a data, for him, this is observation, right? And if the observation is large, he's going to think, okay, my thought is this one, and then I'm going to invoke that one. So you don't get into this problem there at all. Right.
Yeah, and so typically you don't have to explicitly do the context variables in your code as the owner of the control flow in that scenario. The theory is the planner with the right model. GPT-4 is best, but you can sometimes get away with 3.5. DaVinci 003, no. It should pass the variables through as long as you've given the correct description for the function that you're calling and the variables, like they have the right values there. I think that's the trick. If those things don't match, the model's probably not going to find the right place to pass the variables through.
Yeah, I would add that, yeah, it's all about the description, probably. Like, you have to be very explicit. If you have skills that need to be executed in a certain order, or that needs to maybe pass state from one to the other, then for sure you need to explicitly say that. Otherwise, if you're relying on Planner to do that, it might be able to, not guaranteed. A good question. Okay, our next one from John C. When using SK with a history of chat, if the user changes a topic, is there a pattern to follow to detect it and get the SK to only include subsequent prompts?
Getting all the good questions today. These are all excellent, excellent questions. So let's chunk this down. So history of a chat implies we've stored the history of the chat somewhere. Okay, so you've got some database or some object that's tracking the history. So we might need to flush that. So we need to know when we store it, the topic maybe. We might allocate a topic to each individual message, or we might have like some special object that we store that says, the topic changed to this now. So we might have like periodically these new things coming. So we need to segment it because we need to know what the first topic is before we can decide if it's gone to the second or third topic. Okay, so you need to have some stuff in your model that is doing that for you so that you can tell the model when you pass the next message to it, this was the previous topic, this is the user's next message. Does this next message match the prior topic? Like you need to ask it that. So that would be my first thought on that one. Like you need to store the topic for all of your messages or at one point so you can compare.
Or if you can always just send last 4 messages or pick a number, 4, 6 messages and ask, does the current message fit to this one, right? But and you would have basically two parallel conversations, always one hidden. Hey, given these 4 messages and this reply from the user, has the user just changed the message? And if yes, then you could put a flag, right? This way you wouldn't have to, mark. But it is always subtle, right? So you would have, hey, what is the likelihood that he has changed, and how convinced you are that he has changed it? Because sometimes those jumps are not that obvious, right? It's not that I'm jumping from one topic to another, but they can be subtle. So there are some shades of gray in between, definitely, which are difficult. But with something like this, just asking model every time when you receive a message, tell me.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to think about it. Like, do you have a defined list of topics that your bot, in this case, I'm going to assume, knows about and can handle? Are you building an open-ended chatbot? Maybe not. Like, do you need to do that? If you are doing that, what you could do, and I think what Amir just mentioned triggered this for me as well, like you could have a classification for the message, and you could do the last 4. If you want to do a longer running chat, then it gets a little tricky. And oftentimes, like, you want a good chunk of context. There can be sliding window where, slide it last 4 or last, 100 or last 6 months, whatever it is. You could do some classification. So when the user asks something, it could classify it as part of the response. Like, here's the response from the model and the classification or the topic that it's about. And then you can compare that to what you think the prior one was. A few different ways to slice that. There's a good question there. These are good.
We have this notion also, at least in Copilot Chat, if I remember correctly. It's certainly in ChatGPT where you can just open a new chat like window, right? And I don't know if for John, if this makes sense for your application, but if for whatever reason, I'm just throwing out an idea, that you detect that is a change of topic and you want to kind of have a clean slate, then maybe you can either like clear the history or something like that, just so that it doesn't, what do you want to call it, pollute the message or pollute the chat with the previous conversation. So anyway.
Yeah, Alex, I was gonna say Copilot Chat. I would look at the model there where we wait for the human input that we've switched context and use a different bot so that the humans can flip back and forth. Has been our most successful. But if you figure out a clue as to how to make that automatically happen, we'd love to have that conversation and understand it too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I think this is actually our last scheduled question. So L Teggy from Discord asks, I'm working on a project that aims to build an LLM chatbot, personalized data, which will be able to include images in their answers. These images must have been labeled as appropriate for the context of the question. I really don't know where to start. If it's better to use Azure OpenAI or Semantic Kernel or something else. Also, if I have to start coding them from scratch or not. So a couple things. So this second piece, Azure OpenAI, the Azure OpenAI and Semantic Kernel are it's not like either or. It's like Semantic Kernel uses Azure OpenAI or whichever model provider you want to use, and things like, especially for this about like including images. I don't know if you're like retrieving images that you already have like stored, or if you want to use image generation like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion or things like that. But I think it's actually an interesting scenario because you need to, in the images that you're presenting to the user, you do hopefully want to make sure that they're appropriate images to show. And that can be, maybe some of the models already like have, I believe, like the DALL-E API, right? They do a lot of responsible AI work already to filter or to make sure that images are appropriate. But if you're using like off-the-shelf image generation, you might not always get that. So that could be a reason why you might want to use, let's say, Azure OpenAI or that enterprise offering, as opposed to something that you just grab off the shelf. yeah, I mean, the LLM chatbot on personalized data, it's stuff that we've talked about throughout this call. So if there are, look at Copilot chat. That's our kind of like default answer to at least a getting started point, and see if that is able to handle your scenario. I don't think we include image generation or as a plugin yet for Copilot
No, there's
chat.
no images.
Yeah.
But in the extension, we have access to image generators, right? So a team could easily use Copilot chat and break it apart in the extension and get access to the backends and start prototyping and building.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Okay, so actually we're in this rare situation where we've run out of submitted questions. We have 10 minutes left of the office hours. So it's actually open forum if anyone wants to, actually, no, there might be some questions in the chat. I'm double checking.
I think we got most of the earlier ones, Alex. I think it's there's one from Steve about references in line.
Yes. So this what do we call it? It's like a user experience thing. But one thing that's nice about Bing AI is that when you're doing a search there and you're chatting with it, it's able to cite its sources, right, and provide links to that. That is a capability that we don't have right now in our Copilot chat, mostly because we're not searching the index as much. You can add in the Bing connector, let's say, but it hasn't been the scenario that we've been focusing on. At the same time, though, I think it's a really good one, especially if you're chatting over your own data, right? And you're ingesting PDFs, ingesting things, and you want to be able to reference like where in the document did you get this answer from. So I like it. I like this as a extension to Copilot chat, and maybe we can borrow some of the great things that Bing has done and hopefully try to like bring that over as well. Yeah, good question.
Steve, did you want to go into more detail? Like, which part of it is the challenging part? Is it the mapping of the reference? So I saw that you've got Azure Cog Search and SharePoint. So you're indexing it with cognitive search, just a standard Cog Search, I'm assuming, like no vectors or anything at this point?
Yeah, no, correct. So I was using Pinecone and the Semantic Kernel originally in a WPF app, and that was going great. But we're just internal Microsoft Stack company, and so we have a lot of resources on SharePoint or Azure Files or whatever have you. So we want to build multiple pipelines in, and then the plan is to have an LLM or planner, as you would say in Semantic Kernel, to decide what type of question, go through various prompt flows to answer various types of questions. One might be an HR question or an engineering question, whatever. And so using cognitive search, it seems to be parsing data okay. And that was part of my previous questions. And actually a vector database underneath like Pinecone, or is it PostgreSQL with a vector implementation on top, which I think seems to be the case, which is fine. It seems to be working okay. But users really want to see that I don't know if it's a trust factor with the LLM or what, but as they're getting the information from the LLM, they simply want to have, links back to the original sources where it can it's all internal network data, pop up a Word doc or a PDF or wherever that source is from. And they love the way Bing does it with the inline reference hyperlinks. In my WPF app, I was using Telerik's conversational UI framework, and it doesn't have those. It's really limited. Teams seems to have these beautiful cards that are multimodal, and I'd love to implement it into Teams directly. And I was trying to set up a low code with the prompt flows. I'm in all the ML, NDA, gazillion NDAs I decided to get in there, but it's really early, and it's easier for me as a dev to just code it. So I'll kind of lean that way. But I'd really just like to get that working in Teams as a Copilot chatbot in there. That's obviously just a RAG model. And everyone, a lot of devs I've talked to in a lot of different places on your Discord as well, are a lot of them are trying to do RAG, right? That seems to be for an internal company, the primary use case. And you saw at the build conference where it looked really simple, just go to prompt flow and hit the thing and boom, it shows up in Teams. It's really not there yet. And I kind of would rather, as a dev, rather code it and then just have a Teams, add-on, utilize this, but you utilize the semantic kernel. But I was just curious, have you seen a lot of this happening so far? And obviously the UX is very important for the users to have the resources. How I guess is the best way to achieve that is my question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm the same. I click the links in Bing. I do the chat, and then I see the links. I hover, I click, and I make my own judgment based on what I see on the other end. So it makes a lot of sense. Shannon, this is another one we probably should think about bringing into Copilot Chat to do an example. Copilot Chat, you've got the web front end there. We don't use adaptive cards, which I think is what teams are using. Maybe we should bring the adaptive cards across. It might be something that we need to do some work on to make it easier, because I think you're right. Everyone eventually will want the same thing, even if initially they don't have it. Once they get in front of their users and their users start playing around with it, they're probably going to get the same feedback that you've just mentioned, which is users want those links. So top of my mind, the most difficult thing will be which sentence in the response maps to which document. If there's multiple documents, it might be that there's just one document that's relevant, because in your company, maybe it's a smaller corpus of data than, Bing's got the entire internet. So maybe it's less likely that you'll have multiple. But, these are things, Shannon, I think maybe we should think through.
Yeah, I think I don't want to make promises that I can't fulfill yet, but we are very concerned about this because it's not the first time we've heard it. And when I think about using this in regulated environments, if it's having a medical conversation with you, you're going to want to make sure that the users have the ability to go out and validate that whatever it's being told they're being told is the right thing. So we've got a couple of different designs that we're experimenting with and looking at. This is super useful to understand your use case, and the Teams cards is your kind of target scenario. So I'd say stay tuned. There's probably some more conversations to have, and this is the sort of forum to get that feedback to us so that we can take that back to those other places and make sure that we're reacting and not just inventing what Microsoft does best, which is whatever we want instead of what you need. So feel free to send any examples you're willing to share, or designs, well, not designs, but to share anything you can about what you're trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to send along, like I've got simple architecture diagrams I could send you. It's pretty straightforward of what we're trying to achieve. Also, we're trying to add in on both the user question coming in as well as the answer before it hits the user, the what do they call it? The Microsoft responsibility layer. It just went live in preview, I think just yesterday. If I'm correct, in the ML Studio, it's now available in there. I wasn't sure if that was built into the SK kernel yet, or can be exposed with the endpoints there yet, or.
Yeah, it's not there yet. It is something that we are also thinking about. The thing with AI right now is everything's happening everywhere all at once. And it's difficult, right, to be across all of it. And I think even the Microsoft story, like how do you go from SK to prompt flow to whatever the thing in the portal's called that does basically the same thing, to Power Virtual Agents, to whatever. Like there's this continuum where maybe developers go over here to SK, or maybe you start at Power Virtual Agent, then you need to back out and go to SK because you realize you want more control for whatever reason. So I think we've got a lot of work to do across many of these different areas. But yeah, appreciate you calling this out, and we'll get back to you on that one also.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Actually, Sandeep, I see you put this in the chat. If you want to just hop off mute, we have like a minute or two left. So you want to just talk through what you shared?
Yeah, this was our #1 problem, right? I'm trying to create an open-ended chatbot, and trustability has always been a problem where we are trying to make sure it doesn't hallucinate and make up things. So we have been trying to do citations. So the first thing that helped me, instead of putting links inside the content of cognitive search fields, I created a new field which is dedicated to URL. That made a huge difference. And in the prompt, I'm saying pick the link and format it in this specific format for Teams to make it work. It's working pretty much like 99% of the time. There are scenarios where it doesn't, but that's all, on the LLM side. It's not deterministic. We have to live with that just because of how non-deterministic all of these apps are, or the apps built on AI, on top of AI are.
Yeah, this is super nice. I would almost say, if you're open to it, doing a small sample, and like it wouldn't be exactly what you pasted there, like a small sample that shows how to do this, that would be something that you could consider contributing to the Semantic Kernel repository. Would be really nice if you're open to that.
Yeah, I'm open to that. So maybe I need a little bit of help, but I'll get with you or Alex, and then we could work on that.
Yeah. You can find us on Discord. Alex is more he's there more often than I am. But yeah, we'd love to. That'd be awesome.
Yes, sure. So I have fine-tuned this a lot over the last couple months or a month and a half. So it could definitely use some help as well. So if anyone wants to modify it and post back, that would be awesome. I'll use it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm second Craig. Let's get this as a sample. I think this is really good and would be very helpful for people to see. Okay, well, with that, we are at time. So again, thank you everybody for showing up. This will be recorded, put on YouTube. So if you want to watch it again, feel free. Otherwise, talk later. See you next time.
Bye.
See you.